Hello and welcome to Behind Open Doors, where we have a podcast for you to take you behind the scenes of what it takes to multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. I'm here with Nick Lombardi, president of Multiply. My name is Aaron Dininny. I am the executive director. And man, we got some cool stuff to talk to you this season about. And what are some first thoughts on those things, Nick?
Well, we're in the new old studio.
Yes.
We're doing video this year, so that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
We're sitting in comfortable chairs. That's nice.
Yeah. I don't know if the visual is better for everybody or, maybe you just want to look on or listen on audio because we're not that appealing to look at, really.
That's true. So, we're still kind of bootstrapping.
Yeah.
But I like it.
Yeah.
I like the scenery.
Definitely. Lots of fun. Cool brick background. Old building that we're sitting in here in Ocean View in Norfolk, Virginia. And we want to talk today about leadership, kind of.
Yeah, I think we're going to need several podcast episodes, several conversations about leadership.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. And before we everybody clicks off, I'm not a leader, so I don't really care about any of this.
Yeah.
You are definitely going to want to hear this one because I think often we listen to leadership podcasts and things like that, and we get this idea of this kind of lofty level of people that are kind of above everybody, that are doing all the decision making, all the important stuff happens at the leadership level. And our goal in this season really is to bring all that down and to level out the leadership playing field, as it were, and to really not even use that term leadership very often.
Yeah. I'm reading a book right now, The Culture Code by somebody, and credit to the author. Yeah. And one of the introductions, he breaks down the four levels of leadership as he sees it, or a researcher, and he says positional leadership is by far the lowest form of leadership. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's, and then things like leadership by influence is like the next highest one. So I think that's what you're saying, sort of like people tend to hear leadership and they might have just started like, okay, we tend to think positional leadership. I'm not an executive director. I'm not a president. I'm not a regional manager, something like that. But that's actually not the most important kind of leadership and the most effective kind of leadership. And there's a lot more to leadership, no matter who you are. I think, right?
Absolutely. And when it comes to leaders and leadership, there is an element of leadership that exists that makes up the majority of a leader's efforts and the leader's experience in a particular scenario, and those happen to be followers. It's typically what they're referred to as is we have leaders and we have followers. And so when we work through this idea of following and what following should look like, we play games as little kids called Follow the Leader, mm-hmm. right? And it's almost ingrained in us as a culture to look to our leaders, follow those leaders, do what they ask you to do, go where they lead you to go. And once again, we want to be able to introduce this idea, a new idea or a new perspective on leadership that I think is helpful, especially for the church.
So why, in your opinion, why do you think we need a kind of fresh perspective or new models and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's not that any other models are terrible or whatever, or I just think that people are flawed, and when we put so much on any one person, and even a group of people in some ways, but especially any one person as a leader, and we look to that person, that everything rises and falls on leadership. I just don't think that's true. I'd say anymore. I don't think it was ever true. I don't, and I think we're seeing, especially in the church, we're seeing leaders fall and churches begin to fail because those leaders are no longer in leadership there, and I would say if a good plurality of leaders was put in place, maybe it wouldn't rely so much on one particular person, right? That's one fatal flaw, I guess you could see, that we need a perspective change on.
I think it's one of the biggest ones. So I'm kind of new to the Multiply. Been on the podcast before, but now hopefully going to be a regular host, attender. So I'm like a simple church guy, and what you're talking about is that's a big proponent, a big reason for simple church is like I've said this often at the Grace Collective and other places is like I don't know that it may actually I know the idea that like one person should teach and shepherd 100 people, let alone 200, 300, 3,000. I don't think it works, like period, full stop. I don't think any one person, with the exception of Jesus, could have possibly been charged with the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry while overseeing their hearts and their minds and their spiritual development, feeding the sheep, shooting the wolves for 100 people at a time. Jesus probably could have done it if anyone could have. And he decided to do 12 at a time. Mm-hmm. And I think the answer to that, and I think we'll get into some of this, is like we need help. We need more people taking on that burden instead of just looking at one person as the answer for 100 or 200 people at a time. Because it leads to bad stuff. It almost always leads to bad stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe some definitions might be helpful to kind of begin with here. So if we were just to define, let's just start with leadership specifically. Sorry to put you on the spot here, but how would you define leadership?
So the soundbite answer that I always give is influence. Okay. That leadership is influence. That if you have a level of influence over another human being, or maybe even an animal, I don't know, then
zookeepers.
Then you're a leader. So if you're a mother and or a stepmother even or something like that, and you have a chance to speak into, to influence, to add to, or to detract from the personality of children, I think that makes you a leader, not because you're a mom, not because you have that position, but because they're going to listen to you and they're going to be formed by you. And so you're a leader.
Yeah. I would concur. I would definitely, so leadership is influence, but it's not merely influence, right? Like, I think at the most basic level though, that's true, that if you have some sort of decision-making power or directive power over a person, you are leading in some way. So statements like, everybody's a leader, in that sense can be true, mm-hmm. right? Like, in some way, you are leading something. So I think it's a good start. I think it's helpful because you can't have leadership without a context as well. That was somewhat alluded to there, is that if you're a mom, if you're a boss at work, if you're in the Navy, if you are in a church, in a ministry of some kind, those are all different contexts of leadership. And so now leadership is going to be fleshed out very differently in those different contexts. You're going to be in a shepherding kind of leadership mode as a mom or a dad in a home. And even in a ministry, you're going to be in more of a directive mode. If you're, a chief in the Navy, you're going to be in kind of both of those. If you're a boss at a business of some kind, you want your people to be on your side, but you got to tell them what to do sometimes. Mm-hmm. So the context matters about leadership for sure. Anything else on leadership that we're missing in this definition?
Well, I think responsibility is the other big one. And that typically comes with like that positional leadership where you're in a position that the buck stops with you, that you are the one who, if you're at a business or something, like the sales at the end of the quarter, it's your job to make sure that that sales number is hit. It's your job to make sure that the project is finished. It's your job to make sure that the building stands for a long time, the house is built correctly, that kind of thing. So you you're the leader because you're the one that needs to make sure, the guy laying the bricks, the guy hammering the nails, at the end of the day, he can go home and get paid. And if the house falls the day it's finished, that's not his responsibility necessarily. But if you're the designated project manager, developer, that kind of thing, then you're the leader. You're responsible for making sure the house stands.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just pulled up Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, because you keep hitting this position thing and it's reminding me of that. So I think culture code, so quick story, went to Barnes & Noble, saw that book, read it like the first pieces of it, and I was like, wow, this looks like a great book. Bought the book and haven't touched it since. So I'm glad you brought that up. It makes me want to go read it now. So level 1 is position. Level 2 is permission. Level 3 is production. Level 4 is people development, and level 5 is pinnacle. This is Maxwell now. So position is very, like you already said, it's just, that's your position is the leader because of your role. Permission is you've built trust with people, you have a relationship with them, and now they are giving you permission to lead them, essentially. Level 3 is production. All right, we're all on board. Let's go. Let's produce. Let's get in really good mode of production. Level 4 is people development. That's like you've now led well. Now you need to bring people along to take on leadership with you, and essentially, and maybe you have to go on to the next thing, or they're over now a department because it's grown so much, whatever the case may be. And then level 5 is pinnacle. That's like, I don't really like his definitions here, but the highest level leadership, most challenging to attain. It requires longevity and intentionality, and this is like he describes us almost like the guy who speaks at conferences is at like the pinnacle of leadership. I'm not crazy about that, but I know what he's trying to say there. Like the guy who's sought after, the person who's sought after because they're a great leader. So that's Maxwell's 5 levels. I think that's helpful.
Yeah,
to
that's helpful.
Continue to help us define this conversation. I would add to our makeshift definition here of leadership with influence, I think is important. Context, or I would say like direction, is certainly like we got to have a goal. Like there's a part of leadership that's important, that you want to raise a good family at home. You want to attain the goals for the people you work for in your business. You want to accomplish the mission of God in the church. Like there's a goal, there's a direction. So influence, direction. And the last one, I think, is what is going to take on some more full shape over this entire season we have here, is followers. A leader is not a leader if a leader does not have somebody following them. Is that true?
Yeah, I guess you're just somebody walking around.
Yeah.
Like so.
Yeah.
From a physical sense, for an analogy.
Because even in a positional level of leadership, the followers understand that that person is in charge.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The person that's in the organization, they know like, well, they got the job. They're now get paid the big bucks, as people say, right? So they're the one in charge. So followers, influence, direction. These are 3 components of leadership that I think are important. I would add context to direction. I think that's important. However, in 1988, a guy named Robert Kelly wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review, and it was titled "In Praise of Followers." Okay, so he started to really shift the focus from all of this great man theory leadership that had been attained through the industrial age and corporate development through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even definitely into the 80s, and he began to see a problem with so much focus on leadership that we were just creating kind of robotic people who were just doing their job. Now, of course, since then, a lot has changed in the industrial industry, and that kind of deal.
You said great man.
Yeah.
Great man. Is that like a proper noun, big G, big, is that a thing? What is that?
Yeah. So great man theory, trait theory of leadership is basically that leaders aren't made, they're born. And so that was largely the view of leadership up really through about the 1950s and any time essentially before that. We'll talk more about that in coming episodes, but it's worth saying now that that was the idea, that there were just people who were taller than everybody else, more handsome or pretty than anybody else, and they were the ones that just needed to be chosen as a leader because they looked like it and they had confidence and they had all these things. And so the great man theory is basically that, like, they had the traits of the one who's supposed to be in charge from a human perspective. And I think we'll see that God has a little different perspective on leaders and leadership. And so Robert Kelly writes about this, writes in this article in praise of followers, that we need to do a better job of focusing on building up followers, because leaders are not going to be successful without good followers. Mm-hmm. And it's certainly not going to be sustainable if you're just a directive style leader getting people to do their job. That only goes but so far. I mean, eventually Tom Brady's going to leave and go to Tampa Bay. Like, that was the resounding message in New England, right? Was do your job, that kind of deal from Belichick. And we saw how that worked out for Belichick eventually, right? Tom was willing to do that for all those years and then moved on,
So I think you have this one before the 1950s or so, people are really focused on the leader. Like, what were the traits that this person was born with? Were they born tall, charismatic, kind of the George Washington theory? He's just like the tallest guy in the room. And you're like, oh, that guy's probably a natural leader. And then this guy, I'm sorry, R. Kelly, is Robert Kelly, came along. Different, not the jailed singer R. Kelly. I hope. I don't know.
No,
I hope.
Not.
All right. He comes along and he's like, okay, maybe it's enough now of focusing on the leader and those traits. What if we focus on that, but also focus on the people who are following and developing them, their traits, their makeup, that kind of thing?
Yeah. And he actually coined this term that we're going to use a lot from here forward, called followership. And he would say that while, yes, we need to have great leaders and leadership, leaders are still needed, we also need to have good followers and good followership. And so he coined this phrase, and I think that it's a little cumbersome, a little weird to say, like, but at the same time, I think it's helpful because I would like to see us sort of equate the two, to say, like, we can't have good leadership without good followership, and we cannot have good followership without good leadership. And I really want to see, I'm saying this from a sense of, like, in churches, what we're doing with Multiply, I really want to see that leadership playing field, as it were, sort of leveled out a bit, to say we need great followers and great leaders. And if we do a few things well, and we'll talk about what those things are, those elements are, I think we can have a sustainable model of church and reaching people and mission, something that doesn't just all fall on one person to kind of get the word from God and tell us what to do so we can do it. Like, I think that can happen as people work together and a cohesive leadership team of people, and a team of followers, in order to accomplish God's mission, or even, I would say, as Robert Kelly found out and has talked about, in mission in business as well.
So in business as well. So this theory we're talking about, this came from the business world. Like, did it develop in the church, or is this like a biblical thing kind of drawn out, or initially?
Yeah.
Or no?
So it's a great question. So I have a quote right here from that article. In Kelly writes, "Followership dominates our lives and organizations, but not our thinking, because our preoccupation with leadership keeps us from considering the nature and the importance of the follower." So he's saying we are so preoccupied with building good leaders and a leadership culture and having great leaders that that we're so distracted from the nature and importance of the followers, like similar to what I just said. So Robert Kelly writes this article in the Harvard Business Review in 1988. This is not, I don't know where his stance is with Jesus, so I can't assume anything there, but it's not coming from a Christian perspective. This is from the business world telling the world, Harvard, I mean, it's a pretty big name, right? Telling the world we need to focus more on followers. And I think that is something that the church should own. I think that we already should be doing this well. And we have a guy kind of from the secular world saying we need to focus more on followers. And Jesus' first words to his disciples, each one of them individually was, "Come and follow me." That to me lays claim to Christians should be able to do this best. Now I'm fine with God using by common grace some guy in the secular world telling us that the research is showing we need to focus more on followers. That's fine. I get that. But now I'm saying as the church, we should be the ones that are promoting and focusing on followership, because we have another word that we use for followership in the church, a word that you're not super crazy about anymore. And we can talk more about that maybe at length in different episodes. But what would that word be? What word am I thinking of?
Probably discipleship.
Yes,
Okay.
Absolutely, right? So we say discipleship, and you found out some really interesting information about that word recently.
Did I?
Yeah. You told me about an article that you read. Was it Barna?
Yeah.
Some research on that?
Yeah, I mean, the long and short of it is that people in America and the West especially, that they don't know what discipleship means. And so this is Christians included, or especially, the kind of just Christians that are hearing preaching every Sunday morning. When you do a study and the Barna surveyed them, and it was like, what does discipleship mean? There was almost no consensus whatsoever. And shockingly, even though the church leadership has focused tremendously on using the word discipleship and having discipleship programs and adding it into their mission statements and things like that, by and large, people don't even really know what we mean when we say discipleship. So, yeah, at some point it would be great to get into. What do we do with that? Is that a word? Do we abandon it? Is it a word that's a must in the kind of Christian vocabulary? Where did it come from? Would love to dive into all that stuff. But for now, I think I'm curious. I'm curious about is discipleship different than followership? Or are you saying that they're sort of exactly the same?
I think mostly I'm saying that they're the same in the sense that we are called to go and make disciples of all nations. A great classic Great Commission text in Matthew 28, and making disciples, and Paul using terms like imitate me as I imitate Christ, and 2 Timothy 2, that I taught you teach faithful men who will teach others also. There's a model of passing down the following of Christ. So go make disciples is a command to go make followers of Jesus. Go teach people to follow Jesus,
right?
To choose him, to follow him as Savior, obviously, and Lord, but then live your life modeled after him. That is the essence of followership. So to me, I would say there might be some nuance there, but I would say they're pretty equal. And I think using a term like followership might be more helpful nowadays, it seems anyway, than using a term like discipleship, only because discipleship is distinctly Christian. And again, that's okay more internally. We talk about that as pastors, leaders, ministry leaders, whatever. But what we're seeing and hearing is that people at large don't really know what that means. I prefer to use terms that kind of, it becomes obvious. Like when you say leadership, people have an idea of what that means. I don't think people understand quite yet what followership means, but it's a little more clear than discipleship.
And I want to ask, and then kind of put it off for a second. Is this something that Christians and Christian scholars and theologians, did we miss this in the Bible, or can we see something of followership in the Bible, or is it purely a sort of secular or academic pursuit? But before that, I want to try to drill. If we're going to be talking about followership, I want to personally understand as best as possible the definition, or one that at least works for our conversation. Is it, and this is probably wrong, is it fair to say that followership is the ability or the inability or the measuring of a leader's ability to create good followers? Whereas discipleship is more the act of and the relationship of transferring Christ's likeness one to another.
Yeah. So I think, sort of answering, going back to the original question and into that, I would say language evolves over time, right? And so like we sometimes create words in order to redefine some things or more clearly define some things. And I think that's really all that's kind of happened here, is that sure, a secular world article comes out, says the term followership, and now the church can be like, we're about that. Well, don't you mean discipleship? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's followership, discipleship, same thing. So I don't think there's too much disconnect there. But the way you just defined it, though, like, I would not say that followership is the leader's ability to create good followers.
Okay.
I would definitely not say that.
But it is connected to this idea of leadership quality and leadership.
Kind of.
Okay.
Kind of. Followership focused, we'll say, organization or church. I think you have these three components still. You have leaders, followers, and context. And the idea is that, and this is key to all this, is that leaders and followers co-create a context in which people can thrive and flourish, or which the organization's mission can thrive and flourish, or they can accomplish the thing together. But it's co-created by the leaders and the followers. And now that probably requires more explanation, but I think it's exceedingly important to understand that we are not talking about leaders telling the followers what to do. We are not talking about leaders making better followers. This is not about leadership. This is about followership is about leaders and followers co-creating a context together.
I'm glad I got that wrong, because that was really helpful. Because now I'm envisioning this, like you said, the context, that followership is this, this bubble, whatever, this situation, this place where instead of just focusing on the leader and their traits and their ability to do different things, you're focused on the relationship between the leader and the follower and them co-creating this environment.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And again, we're not doing away with leadership here. We're not doing away with leaders.
Leadership is a part of followership.
It is a part of the followership context. Yes.
Helpful.
Yes.
Very, very helpful. Okay, now I feel prepared. Does that exist in the Bible, or are we just doing like, are you and I becoming sort of leadership gurus, or is this a biblical thing too?
Well, we just want everybody to follow us,
yeah,
and then we'll be good to go.
Hit the subscribe button.
Yeah.
No.
No, not at all. That's exactly what we're going to talk about over the next several episodes here. We're going to talk about followership in the Old Testament. We're going to talk about Jesus as follower. And we're going to make an argument together, not just me, us. We're going to make an argument together that Jesus was the best follower ever.
Wow.
We often like to say Jesus is the best leader. Leadership.
Yeah.
Jesus, CEO. Like all this. No, Jesus did not come to lead. He came to follow, and we're going to show you that in the scriptures. Put a pin in that. And then we're going to talk about following in the New Testament and in the church today and the implications for that. And we're going to get real practical with all this stuff. So we're going to try to do some biblical foundations along with our definitions. We're going to shift to then what's that mean for us today in the church as we live this thing out, and hopefully some action items for your own real life context as well. So I hope you've seen so far in this kind of intro episode to this season that followership, first of all, is a thing, and that it's not all about leaders really anywhere, but we're definitely saying within the church it is not all about the leaders. It's about the leaders and the followers co-creating a context that is going to allow the mission of God to thrive in that context.
I'm excited.
Awesome.
I'm excited for it.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us today. Episode 1, Behind Open Doors. And we're excited that you're here to explore followership this season.
See you soon.